What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB, and more specifically, an episode of Let's Talk Dynasty. As you know, we've been going through these divisional breakdowns. Today, we're going to be talking about the NFC East, your Cowboys, Giants, Commanders, and Eagles teams, giving you everything you need to know about the fantasy football options on those teams, more specifically for Dynasty Fantasy Football. We'll tell you about players that could trend up, trend down, breakouts, busts, sleepers, values, all of the good stuff. But as always, it would not be an episode of Let's Talk Dynasty without my co-host. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get MFGDs into the building and let's start talking about some NFC East. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm ready to talk about the NFC East. Let's get it popping.
Let's get it popping back to back. You would have never thought. But let's kick it off. As always, we've been talking about these teams in order of the lowest projected win total to the highest projected win total. For many people, they are excited about this team, but they do have a projected win total of 6.5 games. So you have your Washington Commanders here. Looking at 2023 specifically, they missed the playoffs. Obviously, we know that. That's why they had the opportunity to draft Jayden Daniels in the NFL draft. But Ben Sinnott also added to this team in the draft, or Ben Sinnott, Luke McCaffrey, Austin Ekeler in free agency, and a coaching change here in Washington as well. Ron Rivera, they move on from him. They've moved on to Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, and probably not as important because he is not going to be calling the offense, but you have the offensive coordinator of Cliff Kingsbury now, who is going to be bringing in that air raid offense as well. 6.5 wins right here for the Washington Commanders. How do we feel about that projected win total, and how do we feel about this team as a whole going into 2024?
I don't think much about this team as a whole going into 2024. I think the media has tried to kind of inflate like what they are. I've heard the media here's one thing too. I've heard the media refer to Jayden Daniels supporting cast as a great supporting cast. I don't think they're all that great. Not super high on Terry McLaurin. So I guess what I'm saying is I could see them just under 6.5 wins. So maybe even just 6 wins, 6-win team. I don't see them doing much better than that.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a team that's competing for last place in their division. I think the Giants are going to give them a run for their money with Daniel Jones under center. But I do think that this is a team that's going to need to take a year or two to kind of get to where they want to get. Also, you look at the division as a whole, you know, the Eagles and the Cowboys, these are some good football teams. I don't really think Washington has a chance to compete for the division title. As far as 6.5 wins, I think they could do it. How likely though? It's going to depend on the development of Jayden Daniels and what this offense turns into with him under center. He brings a new element to this offense that a lot of people don't or aren't familiar with in Washington over the last couple of years. I guess the last person who had this type of potential was not for the Washington Commanders, more so for a Washington other football team name, and it was Robert Griffin III. So he probably was the last one that gave him that type of dynamic backfield quarterback type of action. Betting man, I'll go underneath 6.5, but more specifically, let's talk about some of the dynasty options here. Looking at keep trade cuts, top 250 ADPs for Superflex leagues, you have Jayden Daniels. He's being drafted as the 25th player overall right now, the QB 12 in Dynasty Fantasy Football. You have Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 38, Brian Robinson Jr., running back 28, Ben Sinnott, tight end 14, Jahan Dotson, Luke McCaffrey, and Austin Ekeler rounding out the top 200. And 50 players here for the Washington Commanders. Looking at the ADP, big thing that sticks out, we're viewing Jayden Daniels as a top 12 guy out the rip. Is this something that you support, or how do you feel about Jayden Daniels being a top 12 quarterback day one?
Nah, dog. Nah, I don't see it there, man. And I'm not going to sit here and just poop on me. I understand why he is where he is because of the upside and all that, but I just have a gut feeling that he shouldn't be there at this point in time. Top 12 quarterback? No. I have to see the guys who he's ahead of, but I just can't see it. I think there's more than 12 guys that I probably would rather have in Dynasty than Jayden Daniels.
I made these graphics last night, and since then, Daniels has moved up one spot already, so now he's 11. He passed Kyler Murray in Dynasty rankings.
I have a problem with that.
It feels like it's getting very high for Jayden Daniels. And you said, you know, you see the upside, the rushing upside, the passing upside, everything that he showed at LSU. Obviously, in that year there that he had for the Tigers, he put it all on display. And the only thing that's in the back of my mind is, was it LSU an LSU's offense, or was it Jayden Daniels, or is it a mix of both? Because the years that you were at ASU with Brandon Ayuk and Ricky Pearsall and other NFL wide receivers, you didn't score 50 touchdowns. You didn't win the Heisman Trophy. You went to LSU with Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr. That scheme there is a very friendly scheme. It makes me wonder. Look, I understand. The same bet that you're making with a guy like Jayden Daniels is the bet that you were making last year with the rushing upside of a guy like Anthony Richardson, that you were making in years past with Lamar Jackson, that you were making in years past with Trey Lance, even with the rushing upside. Like, these are the same bets. They're risky bets, but when they pay off, they hit big. Coming off the board as QB12, it's rich for me. I don't think I can draft him as QB12 personally.
No.
Not when you get Kyler Murray later. Not when you can, really, it's going to sound so homerish, but when you can wait and you can get a guy like McCarthy 12 spots, 10 spots lower at the quarterback position. We're talking rounds lower than you can get Daniels, the offense he's tied to. It sounds homerish, and that's why I didn't want to say his name, but like, it feels like the hype is really crazy. Even look, let's just throw another name out there. You could say Drake May. You want to take the bet on Drake May. Drake May is the quarterback 19 right now, in the same range as Bryce Young and Bo Nix.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Jayden Daniels is a bad quarterback, but I'm saying that there was a conversation in the offseason and over the last year that Drake May was the number 2 quarterback in the class, that Drake May was as talented as Jayden Daniels, and the gap is significant between the two. Different situations as well. Take that into account. But my overall point, it's a very rich price to pay for a guy like Jayden Daniels right now.
Yeah, Anthony Richardson, Jayden Daniels of slight frame. Like, yeah, man. I'm not hedging my wagon to Jayden Daniels, not as the 12th quarterback. No, not this season. I need to see more than a deep pass and a scramble into the end zone for me to start moving him up past guys like Kyler Murray. So, yeah.
That's the one that's egregious to me, is the Kyler Murray, having him above him. But I've talked at length and at exhaustion levels of how much I like Kyler Murray this year and how much Kyler Murray is continuing to be disrespected. I don't get it. Whatever. People hate Kyler Murray. Looking at the other ADPs though, I mean, you have Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 38. You think that at this point, Terry McLaurin, the conversation has always been, he doesn't have a quarterback. We haven't got to see the chance of him break out because the quarterback play. Is this it? Is this what you've been waiting for? If you've had Terry McLaurin this whole time, is this the opportunity where Terry McLaurin finally, lives up to what we think he could have been?
I mean, Terry McLaurin, I think we said on the other show, like last week or the week before, he's kind of just a dude now, solid little wide receiver. He's not the Terry McLaurin from the past where we were looking at him as like a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. I think, man, it sucks when it happens in the NFL, but I think it's one of those cases that maybe too much time has passed and he's had all these pedestrian quarterbacks, and now he's starting to finally get one, but he's starting to get like a little bit, deep into his prime. So yeah, I'm not super high on Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, they have a couple other young guys, that they've drafted over the last couple of years. We'll talk about them, I guess, briefly. How do you feel, one, about Brian Robinson Jr.? He's kind of the younger running back that they have here. Last year, they used him kind of more in the passing game than I thought that they were going to, but then they bring in Austin Ekeler this year. Maybe Austin Ekeler is now going to be used as that pass-catching back. And then after that, how do we feel about the additions of Dotson, McCaffrey, and Ben Sinnott over the last couple of years as receiving threats?
I mean, I feel like their running back room is pedestrian. It's pedestrian. Austin Ekeler, he's washed. Like, he was washed last season, and they signed him this season like he about to be somebody. But
I'm not excited about Ekeler at all. I will never roster Austin Ekeler on a fantasy football team of mine ever again.
Yeah, me either. I'm cool on Austin Ekeler. And Brian Robinson, he's always been just another running back to me, 8-point per game guy. Like, he's just there. Luke McCaffrey, I don't care about him until he does something. Ben Sinnott, he has some potential. We'll see what happens there. Maybe he does something. And I haven't seen another young wide receiver stock fall as much as Jahan Dotson's stock has fallen since like last season. Like, I'm having a hard time moving him in other leagues. Nobody wants him. Like, he's on my bench in some of the other leagues. In the league we're in, I have him on the bench after guys like Polk, McClellan, like McMillan, guys like that. And yeah, I'm not gonna say I'm out on Jahan Dotson, but ain't nobody checking for Jahan Dotson. I'm definitely not checking for him, and he's on my team.
Yeah, I think of the guys that have been in this receiving room, I think Dotson is more talented than McCaffrey. But I think if I had to make a pick between all of these guys, the one I'm the most excited about is Ben Sinnott. I think he's the most exciting at the tight end position. But other than that, like these guys are just dart throws in my opinion. I'm not really looking at McCaffrey. I'm not looking at Dotson. If you can get him for cheap, why not? But Ben Sinnott is probably the only other guy that I'm actually looking at.
Yeah, man, this team is like a very. I'm not high on this team, bro. I'm not high on this team. Let's be okay, Andrew. Look, let's be
It's going to
completely
have to
honest.
be the Jayden Daniels show. It has to be.
That's what I'm about to say. Let's be completely honest here. We're almost forcing ourselves to try to talk about these other assets, but Jayden Daniels is the only one, and maybe Terry McLaurin. Just as a like, we have to respect him because of the way he's produced in the past. But Jayden Daniels is the only asset on this team to get super excited about. Terry McLaurin, if you have him on your team, congratulations. You have a good flex player. And that's pretty much what it is. Brian Robinson, he's a good injury replacement. Austin Ekeler, you should not have him on your fantasy rosters, let alone your dynasty rosters. Ben Sinnott, good player for your taxi squad. Luke McCaffrey, good player for your taxi squad. Jahan Dotson, good player for your taxi squad. So that's pretty much how I view that entire team in terms of dynasty fantasy football.
There's a reason why we said that they will be contending for last place in this division. There's a reason.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
defense is going to need to improve as well. They've sold off, the Montez Sweats of the world, and over the last couple of years, they sent them to you guys. They got to improve. Chase Young no longer there. Like they're gonna have to improve, man. It's just the way it is. But let's not.
Hyatt tank.
Yeah, let's not keep talking about the Commanders. Let's move on to the next team. There's a team here that's also kind of bad as well. Projected 6.5 wins. You got the New York Giants. Now, with the New York Giants, they missed the playoffs in 2023. In the offseason, they have the major, I guess, quote unquote, major free agent addition of Devin Singletary. They also bring in Drew Lock, which if you looked at Daniel Jones' preseason performance today, they might need Drew Lock sooner than they think. And then you have the major draft additions of Malik Nabers, Theo Johnson, and Tyrone Tracy Jr. Look, this is a rough football team, I think. Really, there's not a lot, kind of similar to the Washington Commanders, where there's not a lot to get excited about other than some young guys like Malik Nabers. But 6.5 wins, you going over or under, man?
I'm going under. They trash. They might get 4 wins.
They might get the number 1 pick, bro.
They might get, yeah, man. This team is trash, man. Like, I'm really anxious to start talking about these players though, because I'm gonna take a good little chunk talking about Daniel Jones.
Is this a team that could be checking their AP perfect time in Shadur Sanders next year?
Oh man, that sucks. They picked the wrong year to need a quarterback.
Next year?
Yeah, they picked the wrong
I'll tell you
year.
what, all that offseason Hard Knocks drama of them, Dable saying, hey, I would trade up to go get Jayden Daniels. I would trade up to go do that. And then them having the conversation with New England about maybe wanting to move up to 3.
Yeah.
Malik Nabers is a hell of a football player, a very, very good football player. I think he's going to be a stud at the NFL level. The Giants should have probably considered J.J. McCarthy at 6. They probably should have.
Look, let me tell you this. Drew Lock will get at least 8 games started this season, at least.
Well, you bring that up. Let's talk about the ADP of these guys. You got Malik Nabers as the wide receiver 8 in Dynasty right now. Daniel Jones is the QB 29, barely hanging in there in those like starting quarterbacks in Dynasty. Devin Singletary, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Theo Johnson. Drew Lock isn't even in the top 250, but you have Daniel Jones there as QB 29. You think this is the end of the Daniel Jones era in 2024? You think that's nail in the coffin?
Bro, I'm not trying to be a prisoner of the moment, but I just watched Daniel Jones put on a 2-point QBR performance in the preseason. Now, I understand it's just the preseason, but I went into it thinking that he was injury prone and horrible. And then how does he respond to that? He's throwing pick sixes and he has a 2-point QBR. Daniel Jones, the Giants don't even want Daniel Jones. They had to talk themselves into Daniel Jones the way we just had to talk ourselves into talking about the Commander. That's how the Daniel Jones experience with the New York Giants has gone. Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback. He was not a good quarterback when he was drafted. He's not going to be a good quarterback. He may be good enough to be a backup, but in the world where Nathan Peterman is a backup, what does that really say about you, Daniel Jones? For the love of God, for Malik Nabers, I hope that he can somehow be coherent enough to make him a relevant fantasy asset. But I feel sorry for any player that's on that team that does not have the requisite skills to overcome the odds of having Daniel Jones as their quarterback. Thank you very much.
Malik Nabers is about to crash out this year. He's about to crash out, dude. Like, we're about to see Stephon Diggs level temper tantrums on the sideline. Let me introduce you, Malik Nabers, to the Drake London career path that we've had the last couple of years. Desmond Ridder, all of these bums. And now, year 2, 3 down the road, you get a competent quarterback. That is the path for Malik Nabers, whether people want to believe it or not. And I made a video for BDGE this offseason, and it got a ton of heat. I mean, the comments on that video were, "I'm an idiot. That is the worst advice I've ever got." And you know what? When you go against the grain, you trigger a lot of people. And I told people that at the time, Malik Nabers' value is probably the highest that it will be for the next 2 seasons. I mean, we just saw the ADP right now. He's the wide receiver. He's the wide receiver 8. People are talking about him the way that we're talking about Nakua, Garrett Wilson, all these other guys who do have quarterback play. Do not hear what I am not saying. Malik Nabers is as talented as they come. One of the most talented wide receivers as a rookie in the NFL, probably today. But the quarterback play is going to be abysmal. It is going to be a bad year for them to pick a rookie quarterback, kind of like the Desmond Ridder years when Atlanta picked Desmond Ridder as their quarterback. It is going to be a while before Malik Nabers gets some consistent, competent quarterback play, and we've seen it with guys like Garrett Wilson who are super talented that can't get into that top 12, can't get into that top 15 because the quarterback play is so bad. There's not enough touchdown opportunity. There's not enough, efficiency in the offense. We've seen it with Drake London, very talented player.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if this is not going to hit your earlobes well, and it's not going to sound good for you. Malik Nabers is not going to meet the ADP of wide receiver 8 for the next couple of seasons. His value is so high right now, and I know the potential. We love Malik Nabers. The situation is abysmal. It's going to be so bad.
You would have to they would almost have to hit for your prediction to not be true. They would have to hit on a quarterback next season, and that quarterback will have to come into the league and take the league by storm. That's what will have to happen in order for him to meet his ADP in the next 2 seasons. I believe that, and in terms of on the field, like NFL stuff, I think the Giants should have taken Rome Odunze instead of Malik Nabers for the reason that you've seen it on Hard Knocks. Malik Nabers is not the type of player that's going to sit quietly if he's not getting his touches and if the team is losing. And boy, oh boy, is that team going to be losing. That team is going to be losing left and right, and he's not going to be getting the ball. Had they drafted Rome Odunze, they would have got a guy who was going to come in, be quiet, be professional, no matter what's going on with the team, and be patient to when they actually get a somewhat competent quarterback. That's not going to be Malik Nabers. And I don't know what impact that's going to have on his production on the field. Usually it doesn't have any impact on those guys. Those guys are usually who they are no matter what's going on. But yeah, man, his stock is not going to get higher than it is now. Not for the next 2 seasons, but if you have a team capable of having him wait that long to become the player that you think he could become, go ahead. He could be on your team, but don't draft him thinking that he's in the same situation as Marvin Harrison, where you're taking Malik Nabers and then plugging him in as your wide receiver 1, because that's not going to happen.
I saw some takes on Twitter the other day, and that's probably part of the issue is they're Twitter takes and people just tweet nonsense. But there were people that were saying, I think it was after a couple of training camp highlights of Malik Nabers making some catches against Giants DBs. And it was like, we're at the point in the offseason where Malik Nabers is the wide receiver 1. He has surpassed Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's like, no, you guys don't want to do that. Don't do that, because Marvin Harrison Jr. has elite quarterback play. right now,
Yeah.
has an elite target share right now, and
Yeah.
is an elite prospect right now.
Yes.
So don't confuse it. Like you said, in fact, I will say if you can make that flip, if people do feel that way and you can make that flip Nabers for
Do
Marvin right now. Do it right now. And if you want to buy Marvin Harrison, if you want to buy Malik Nabers on your dynasty team, do it in about 6 months when Malik Nabers' cost falls to about wide receiver 12, wide receiver 15.
Yeah.
Because it's going to fall. It's not going to stay at wide receiver 8. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you're right.
Sorry, that's going to be on our receipts episode for sure. I already know that since I said that with so much conviction, it's going to end up there. One more piece before we get out of the Giants. You got a lot of uncertainty. I guess Devin Singletary, do you feel like he is a guy that we can plug in as like a low end running back 2 this year, like a sneaky running back 2?
Yeah, I think Singletary. I'm actually kind of high on Singletary, especially. I'm not gonna say the taboo word redraft. I'm not gonna do it, but it's relevant that Tyrone Tracy Jr. may or may not. I don't know. He might actually lost his opportunity to be their future starter. At his was he undrafted, Andrew, or was
Tracy?
he?
No, he was taken. I think he was a 5th round pick.
So he was a late round pick. Like
Yeah.
5th round who get injured like that, they usually don't look to those guys to be their future at that position, especially a disposable position like running back. We've seen the way the Giants front office talked about Singletary on Hard Knocks, and that was going into the season. But now with this Tracy injury, you're probably going to get a lot of value from Devin Singletary. So I think it is fine to have him as your running back 2 this season. But in terms of like dynasty, I'm still not looking at Singletary as like this big, like long-term answer. But if you have a team that's close now, having Singletary roster is pretty damn good. So yeah, I'm with you on it.
Yeah, and then the only other thing that I would like even bring up is I agree. I think the door has opened for Eric Gray to take the running back 2 job. It was initially, I think, all Tyrone Tracy was my opinion. It's opening for Eric Gray. I'm still keeping an eye on it. Tracy's injury doesn't seem like it's too serious, but he is still missing time, which obviously you don't want to see your 5th round rookie missing time in training camp. But the only other thing that I would bring up is you kind of have 2 tight ends there in Theo Johnson and not Eric Bellinger. Eric Bellinger is a musician that I listen to. Why am I spacing his name? Daniel Bellinger.
Daniel.
Yeah, you have those 2 guys. I actually liked Bellinger a lot when he was coming out of college.
Yeah.
You think it's Theo or you think it's Bellinger if you have to make a bet on the guy? Or does it matter? It doesn't. If we're talking about Malik Nabers is about to be a crash out, then we're probably not even thinking about putting these guys on our roster.
Yeah, but for the sake of discussion, it probably should be Bellinger, but it's probably going to be the way they were talking about him is probably going to be Theo Johnson.
I think they like him as a blocker.
Who, Theo Johnson?
Yeah, I think they like the way that Theo blocks.
Oh man.
Which in a way means that they're going to put him on the football field more because they are going to need to block for Daniel Jones.
They probably need to use 2 tight end sets though too. But Daniel Jones is so bad, I think that's the least of their worries.
Can you believe that man made like $150+ million?
Yeah, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe they stuck with him this offseason. I think they would have been better off taking Bo Nix or somebody, to be honest.
Penix, whatever. Honestly, if we keep talking about these Giants, I'm about to crash out. So I'm going to move us on to the Eagles. They have a projected win total of 10.5. Now we're talking about a good football team here. Finally, this is a team that last year goes to the wild card game and gets shocked by Baker Mayfield, 32-9. Now, Jalen Hurts, he was kind of banged up down the stretch. The play calling of offensive coordinator Brian Johnson was pretty bad down the stretch, and because of that, he got fired, let go. They bring in former Cowboys and former Chargers offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, who's going to be bringing in this very pass-friendly, pass-happy scheme that's going to focus on pushing the ball down the field, probably peppering his slot wide receiver with targets like he did with the Cowboys in CeeDee Lamb and like he did with the Chargers in Keenan Allen. Now, in the offseason, they also added Saquon Barkley. So, talk about one of the most sought-after free agents in this market this year. Saquon Barkley lands with the Eagles. Paris Campbell also, probably not that big of a deal. And Will Shipley in the NFL draft. 10.5 wins. I usually let you go first. I think they're going over.
Me too. 10.5 feels low for some reason. I feel like you could feast on that division. You automatically get 4 wins. The Cowboys, we ain't get to them yet, but we will. They'll find a way to lose one. they'll split with them, so that's 5 wins at the least. They'll split with the Cowboys, so that's 5 wins right there. So now we're talking about what, like 6 more wins. So I could see it without me just knowing like the schedule on the back of my hand. I think a lot of people are still thinking about how things didn't go exactly their way last season either, but really I think this team has the ability to actually run away with the division.
I agree, and I'll go as far as to say, I don't hear a lot of talk about it, on NFL Network, on ESPN, these big name networks that talk about these teams. You hear a lot about, well, the Houston Texans, could be making a run at a Super Bowl, the Chiefs and the Bills and all of these teams that we think can make a run at the Super Bowl. I think the Eagles have as good of a chance as anybody to make a run at a Super Bowl in 2024. We're talking about a team that just 2 years ago was there, was playing in a Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes. The defense has gotten maybe not better, but it hasn't lost a step. They've been just as good over the last couple of years. They've drafted phenomenally with Howie Roseman. If the idea is to push the ball downfield and this offense gets a little bit more up tempo passing, and you add Saquon Barkley to this backfield as well, like, brother, this is a team that could win 12, 13, 14 games, maybe. Like, I think they could really legitimately be a Super Bowl favorite. And by the 4 months from now, we could be talking about, are we going to get the Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes rematch in the Super Bowl?
This is a contending team. I don't know why they're 10.5. I don't know. I think people have recency bias. I mean, I think that's the only thing I could really put on it. They added Saquon Barkley. I mean, yeah, I really don't see a reason why they would only see this as a 10-win team. But yeah, I think they're going to be pretty damn good.
I mean, you look at the super flex options that they have here. Jalen Hurts, he's the quarterback 5. There was a point in this offseason where Jalen Hurts was like quarterback 7 in Dynasty rankings. And you said it's the recency bias. People have been, I guess, remembering how he was banged up down the stretch and some other stuff. There was a big dip on Jalen Hurts. I bought the dip in quite a few leagues and tried to in almost all of them. A.J. Brown, he's the wide receiver 9. Devonta Smith, the wide receiver 17. Saquon Barkley, the running back 9. Dallas Goedert, tight end 19. And Will Shipley rounds out their top 250 as the running back 58. This is pretty clear cut and dry. I mean, you have an elite QB1, 2 elite wide receivers. In fact, I will go as far as to say, and I'll let you elaborate on it too, but I think A.J. Brown probably a little bit disrespected as wide receiver 9 right now. I don't know if I could tell you 6 guys better than him in the NFL. And then you have Saquon Barkley, a top 10 guy. Goddard, kind of the odd man out, but you throw him in there as tight end 19. How do you feel about the ADPs here? Do you feel the same as me? It's pretty clear cut and dry.
It's pretty clear cut and dry, but I guess we could take a little dive into AJ Brown's positioning. You said that you feel like he's disrespected. Like, tell me more about that. Who in that top 2? Who are the guys above him that you feel like are causing a level of disrespect? I know one of them is Puka Nacua.
Look, man, I'll just name the guys. AJ Brown should be ahead of Malik Nabers in Dynasty rankings right now.
Oh yeah.
AJ Brown should be ahead of Puka Nacua. AJ Brown should be ahead of Garrett Wilson.
Yes.
And there's an argument where you could say AJ Brown belongs ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr., but that's an argument. After that, you have the clear cut Jefferson, Lamb, Chase, St. Brown.
Yeah.
I don't understand why AJ Brown is not mentioned closer to those 4 than he is to the guys like Nabers, Nacua, That's just my opinion. I feel like if I was doing a dynasty startup, and I did do a dynasty startup this offseason, if I'm doing that, after those top 5 guys, Jefferson, Lamb, Chase, Brown, you could throw Marvin Harrison in there if you want. I'll give you Marvin Harrison. After those top 5, you should be looking at A.J. Brown. I don't know why you wouldn't. I guess age, people are afraid of the age. 27. Dude, like, he's 27 as a wide receiver. He's going to play until he's 31, 32 years old. Like, think of how DeAndre Hopkins was elite down the stretch until he was in, early 30s. AJ Brown is going to do the same thing. There's recency bias, disrespect. I know down the stretch last year, when I was talking about Jalen Hurts and the Eagles not being that good down the stretch, AJ Brown was ghosting us in fantasy, and people were upset about it. I felt the repercussions of that on some of my teams because I had AJ Brown. There's not 6 guys in Dynasty better than AJ Brown right now that I would be drafting ahead of him.
No, there's not. 100% there's not. All those guys, Marvin Harrison, all those guys in that range outside of Malik Nabers, because because after we just talked about the Giants, he should definitely not be in that conversation for where he is. And that's not to talk about him as a talent. That's just talking to him about how long you have to wait for him to actually be able to showcase that talent. Yeah, he should be ahead of most of those guys. And like you said, Marvin Harrison, that's an argument. So
it's just the way that I view it. And I don't have anything, against the Devonta Smith ranking. I think Devonta's is pretty solid. I mean, you have him in the same range as like the Waddles and the Chris Olaves, the Drake Londons of the world. Like that's kind of where he's ranking. He's actually lower than all of those guys, but
yeah.
I think he belongs in those elite wide receiver 2 type of conversations. But I think the only other thing other than that I feel like is like worth even bringing up is we can talk Saquon. Looking at Saquon, he's the running back 9. Of the guys in that range, you have younger guys like Etienne, Kyron, Kenneth Walker, Pacheco. He's the oldest of the bunch. He'll be 28 this year. If you have Saquon on your team, you have to be looking at him as a 1-year kind of option, a year-by-year basis. You're not looking at him as a long-term asset.
Right.
What do you think the upside is for a guy like Saquon this year? You think he has top 5 upside?
He has top 5 upside for sure. For sure, yes. He has top 5 upside. He also has top 5 downside, like where it's like this is the year he falls off, which would be so inconvenient for so many people. But I don't think that's going to happen. But if Saquon is Saquon, then yes, he does have top 5 upside.
Do you think it's worth it? I'm just looking at these ranks. You have guys like Jonathan Taylor, who's going to be 26 this year. He's sitting there as running back 5. Saquon's going to be 20, or he's 27, going to be 28. There's a 2-year age difference there, but you can probably get a future second, maybe even a late first thrown in to down tier. Is that a move you make as a contender? Do you move from Taylor to Saquon and get the extra draft pick thrown in?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I would do that.
I've been exploring a bunch of down tiers at running back. I've sent you a couple of them. I've been doing the down tiers. I went from Taylor to ETN and Walker to Swift and was getting future draft picks thrown in. It's just what I've been looking at right now. I think that's something that I would consider. And then, right now, I think the depth chart is telling us, the preseason games are telling us that Kenneth Gainwell is still the handcuff, but I like Will Shipley a lot. Would you rather have Shipley than Gainwell at this point?
I mean, I've never looked at Kenneth Gainwell as a running back that I would have as my actual handcuff or something like that. He's always been just like that third Darren Sproles role type of guy, like the little gadget player. So I think they probably should look at Shipley as the actual handcuff, and Kenneth Gainwell is kind of just like that third guy, because they still going to use multiple running backs at off. Maybe
Shipley's look good.
Maybe I think they're going to bail Kyle Barkley actually, but I also can see them trying to preserve him because they're a contending team. They don't need to put their whole life and soul on Saquon Barkley's shoulder like the Giants did.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I guess the last other piece, we might as well talk about him. Dallas Goedert. Look,
you already said you don't care about him at all. Don't want to roster him on any of your teams. You already said
he's the forgotten man. Tight end 19. Like I look at that ranking and I'm like, man, that feels low for Dallas Goedert. But then I look at the tight ends above him and I'm like, yep, I would take that guy over Goedert. Yep, I would take this guy. Let me list you the guys above him. Okay. Goedert or Dalton Schultz?
Dalton Schultz, because he's with CJ Stroud.
Cole Kmet.
Cole Kmet.
Luke Musgrave?
Yeah, Luke Musgrave.
Isaiah Likely?
I don't even think you need to ask me that.
Ben Sinnott. You rather just take the upside of Sinnott, huh?
If I'm a rebuilding team, hell yeah.
Freiermuth?
Freiermuth is so solid. They're both solid, but Freiermuth is younger, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
5 years younger, 4 years younger.
Yeah. Freiermuth.
I think you look at 19 and you say, man, this feels low. I think it's accurate. I just think he's a non-difference maker. The difference between a guy like Goedert and the difference between a guy like Cade Otton and Dalton Schultz and all of these other guys, there's no difference. Unfortunately for Goedert, we've been waiting for, I think people waited for Goedert. They wanted Ertz to leave, and then Ertz left, and then they got Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown, and it was like, well, never mind. You're still the receiving option number 3 or the 4th option on this offense, so I'm not too interested in Goedert. If you have him, I'm not going to tell you have to sell him because you probably can't get a lot, but he's just an asset that I never see him improving from where he's at right now, so you might as well get out right now is what I'm saying.
I mean, I traded him for Eric All in the third. So
Yeah, that I don't know. It's a little crazy, but I also don't like Dallas Goedert. But you can make the argument though that, Eric All, if he becomes the starting tight end for the Bengals, his value increases. I can't say that Dallas Goedert's is going to increase.
yeah. And I also
So
have the other young tight end on the Bengals too. So it's kind of just like, let's see what's gonna happen.
fair enough. Well, let's move on to Dallas. This is the last team in the division. They are currently projected to win 10.5 games. Same win total as the Eagles, but the reason why I have them as the top team in the division is because they finished ahead of the Eagles last year. They go to the wild card game. They lose to the Green Bay Packers 48-32. That was kind of like the first time that everybody looked at Jordan Love and said, holy hell. But in the offseason, they don't make a ton of additions. In fact, the only addition in free agency really that matters for fantasy football is they bring back old buddy, old pal Ezekiel Elliott into this backfield. After letting Tony Pollard walk in the draft, they don't really make any additions for fantasy either. So really, we're kind of looking at the same team as we had in 2023 in 2024. Dak, CeeDee, Ferguson, all these guys. 10.5 wins. How do you feel about that? Are we going over or under here?
That's what's gonna happen to the Cowboys. They talking about they gonna be eating, they gonna start choking. 10.5 wins. They might, you know what? They the Cowboys. They very well might get 11 wins, Andrew. They might do it. Then they're gonna choke. So I mean, it doesn't really matter what they do in the season. Now, personally, I think that team's gonna take a slight step back. So I think if the Eagles win 11 plus games, I could see the Cowboys getting 10 wins. 10 wins solid. Like I could see it playing out like that. But no matter what, I don't think they'll ever meet the expectations of their fan base.
Well, because the fan base expectation is Super Bowl or bust, and that's every year. Unfortunately, that's not the way that football works, buddies. Take that from a Chicago Bears fan and a Minnesota Vikings fan. Now, let's look at the ADPs of the players. I guess I'll say I do think that they will go over 10.5, but I agree with you. It's going to be tough. Superflex KTC, top 250. You got CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 2 in Dynasty. Dak Prescott, QB 16. Ferguson, tight end 10. Rico Dowdle as the running back 52. Brandin Cooks is the wide receiver 83. Ezekiel Elliott as the running back 64, and Jalen Tolbert sneaking in there. We said top 250. He is the number 250th player, wide receiver 92 for Jalen Tolbert. I look at this, and a lot of the conversation has been, okay, we need to pay CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb has been holding out for contracts. Dak Prescott is supposed to be having contract conversations. And those are the only two assets on the Cowboys being drafted in the top 100. Jake Ferguson almost there, but everything else is like almost 200 or later. What stands out here? I mean, it goes without saying, CeeDee Lamb is going to be as elite as he can be when he's on the football field, the top 5 guy in fantasy. I guess we can start the conversation at Dak. How are we feeling about Dak?
I mean, I think Dak is very disrespected by the fantasy community.
I think very underrated.
Yeah, I think he's very disrespected by the actual NFL fans. I think he's disrespected by his own team's fans. He's just very disrespected. If you have Dak Prescott as your second quarterback in your super flex spot, I think you're in a good position.
I agree.
A good position. If he leaves the Cowboys after this season, he's going to go somewhere. He's going to sustain success. That's how I feel about Dak. And Dak's not old enough to where you have to sit and worry about his age being a problem. So, I mean, him at what is it, quarterback 16?
I want to say it was even lower than that. Maybe I'm not remember. Yeah, 16. You're right.
Yeah.
He was the QB4 in points per game last year, by the way.
Yeah, I know. You've pointed that out several times in one of our leagues.
He was dominant, bro.
Yeah. So, are there 15 other quarterbacks better than Dak Prescott?
You want to play the game?
Yes, I do.
Let's play the game. I'll start at we can just skip like the top 10, right? Like the Joe Burrows, the Justin Herberts.
Yeah, we want to see how far he is away from the top 10.
Let's start at 11. Jayden Daniels.
I'm taking because it's Dynasty, I'm taking him. I'm not taking him above Jayden Daniels, but we both already stated that we don't think Jayden Daniels should be where he is.
Kyler?
I'm not taking Dak over. Yeah, no. Not taking.
I'll take Kyler. T-Law?
Ooh, I can't take him over T-Law either.
Purdy?
It starts to get tough here, man, but I'm a Brock Purdy guy, man.
Tua?
That's where you start to see some of the. I could see an argument for taking Dak over Tua.
That would only move him up to 15. I think he's properly ranked, but I think I think the point goes to where long-term value, he's where he should be, but I think the production that he's going to give you, he probably can outproduce guys like Purdy and Lawrence and Daniels and Herbert, who's even going above him. Like he can outproduce those guys for the next year or two. So maybe if you're a contending roster and you're looking for that quarterback to put you over the edge, maybe you have a guy like, Anthony Richardson or Jalen Hurts as your QB1, and you're in a super flex and you're like, I want to get a guy who can help me, go to a championship. A guy like Dak Prescott, where you're paying QB 16 prices, who can give you top 5 weeks. Like I think he's one of the better picks and one of the better bets at that super flex position.
Yeah, absolutely. If you had the opportunity to acquire Dak and you're giving up, like, what would you say would be a proper price to pay for Dak?
Well, the guy right below him, if you have to make the trade today, Dak or Jared Goff.
Yeah, hell yeah.
The guy below him is Drake May. You trading Drake May for Dak Prescott if you're in a window right now? I am.
In the window right now, yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of where you're at. I mean, I bet you could probably trade. What do you think? A first and a second get you Dak Prescott in a championship window?
Yeah, probably, maybe even Bo Nix plus.
If you feel like you're a team that can win a championship, are you willing to do your 25 and your 26 first, assuming that you think both of them will be late? Will you do 2 late first for Dak Prescott? No, I would.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, no. 1 first is enough. Like you had me at first and the second. At first and the first, that's too rich. That's too rich for me.
Fair enough. I also just think about like 25's class. If you were wanting to fix your QB position in 2025, I'd rather have Dak Prescott than any of them dudes.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyways, I want to talk a little bit about Jake Ferguson, because Jake Ferguson is a guy I've talked about a lot this offseason. I mean, we look at this offense, right? Like you got Brandin Cooks down there, wide receiver 83, Tolbert, wide receiver 92, the running backs of Dowdle and Elliott. To me, it looks very clearly that Jake Ferguson is the number 2 option in this offense. Am I wrong? Like he looks like he is the clear number 2 threat here. We've talked about tight ends and how tight ends specifically, you want to try and find guys who can be the number 2 receiving option on their offense and can find themselves into positive touchdown opportunities and find themselves into a good amount of targets. It looks like that is what is going to happen with Jake Ferguson. You think Jake Ferguson as tight end 10 right now in Dynasty, you think he's a good value?
Him as a tight end 10? No, man. Yeah, I will say that because I'm willing to bet that there's not a ton of people who are checking for Jake Ferguson.
I am.
I'm willing to bet. Yeah, I know you are. I bet there's a ton of people who have no clue that he's set up right now to be like their second option in the passing game. There's no clue. Most people are like, oh yeah, Brandin Cooks, but last season Cooks finally got to that point where, because remember, Cooks basically was consistent and put up numbers everywhere he went. Last season was the season where I was kind of just like, okay, now he's starting to be a jag. Yeah, he's starting to be a jag now. So yeah, man, that's a real sneaky play right there if you could get Ferguson on your team.
I know you're probably not going to like the idea of it. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll surprise me. But in multiple dynasties this offseason, I have traded Cole Kmet for Jake Ferguson in multiple places. I had a lot of Cole Kmet. I had a lot of exposure to him in a lot of leagues, but I've started moving on. Odunze there, Keenan Allen there. I've moved on from Cole Kmet, just went straight over to Jake Ferguson, and I feel very good about those moves. But supposedly, I guess the league mates of mine that I have in some of those leagues, it's closer than I assume. Maybe I'm high on Ferguson and low on Kmet. I mean, you're the Bears guy. I assume you have a little bit of Bears bias in that conversation, but what do you think about making that move?
I like it. I might actually steal that move and make that move myself. And I like Cole Kmet, like in real life. I think that he'll be a good, but when you just look at the fantasy aspect of it, they have Gerald Everett on the team, and this offensive coordinator has a personal relationship or has a history with Gerald Everett. Yep. And now he's on the roster. The last 2 weeks, I've watched Gerald Everett in the preseason get out target Cole Kmet. So there's a lot to worry about if you're Cole Kmet. And if you could get Ferguson or something like that for him, I think that's actually a real solid move.
Yeah, I was trying to move my Kmet shares for 2 guys, and you probably know them. It was Jake Ferguson and Pat Freiermuth. I was trying to move Kmet for either of those guys, just because I feel like the opportunity is there for those 2. But the last and final piece about the Dallas Cowboys we should probably talk about is the running back situation. You have Ezekiel Elliott and you have Rico Dowdle, who are both going almost identically in ADPs. Right now, you have the running back 52. I guess not identical. It's people are preferring Rico Dowdle over Elliott by I don't know 30 spot difference, 40 spot difference, but about 10 running back slots. Is that the way that you see it? Are you going Dowdle over Elliott in 2024, or are you taking the cheaper Ezekiel Elliott?
Dude, I'm gonna be completely honest. I'm taking a cheaper Ezekiel Elliott. I'm gonna be honest, dude. I don't even think this is like, you know how you said, oh yeah, everything might change by the time the video comes out. I think that's gonna be the case. I don't even think either of these guys are gonna be the running back for this team when the season starts. I think they're gonna pick up either a running back that gets cut from the team or they're gonna trade for a running back. I don't think they're gonna go into the season with a washed up Ezekiel Elliott and a Rico Dowdle that everybody knows isn't good enough to be a starting running back. I just don't see it, man. I don't see it. So I think these ADPs are going to be real outdated by the time we get to week 1.
Don't say that. Don't speak that into existence. But I will say I want to look. I'm just going to pull this up just for funds right now. But I'm looking at free agents in the running back room right now. Who's out there? You got guys like Damian Harris, but he's technically retired. Kareem Hunt, Jerick McKinnon, Latavius Murray. I think the free agent out there, he's not out there yet. You're right. It's going to be a guy who gets cut from a 53 man.
Yeah.
Because I don't think of Kareem Hunt. I don't think of Latavius Murray. I don't think those guys make sense. And you said Khalil Herbert. I pray to God it is Khalil Herbert because I think Khalil Herbert looks.
Why.
You said what?
I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna tell you why. Because I know for a fact Swift is the number 1 on that team. I know for a fact that Rojo was drafted. He's going to stay, and they're already trying to turn Velus Jones into a running back. So, and Khalil Herbert doesn't play on special teams. So he's going to be out there. They'll probably try to trade him. Nobody will trade for him. He'll get cut. And the Cowboys would be very, very, very wise to sign him.
Yeah, I would like that. I think that's the best case scenario for Khalil Herbert, but I think he makes the most sense. Another guy that I think makes a little bit of sense or I guess another team that makes a little bit of sense for like a Khalil Herbert would be like Cincinnati. If he goes to Cincinnati and goes into that backfield as well, I think that makes sense. But yeah, this could be one to monitor. If I have to make a pick between the two, I'd rather not, but I guess make me take Elliott.
Yeah.
I guess make me take Elliott.
Almost for like nostalgia, right? Like just for a little
Whatever.
nostalgia. Let's take Ezekiel Elliott.
You know what? I think he profiles as the goal line back better than Rico Dowdle, and that would be the only way that I would even find him relevant was if he scores 10 touchdowns because the Cowboys have a high-scoring offense.
Yeah, that's about it.
All right, man. Well, that's it for the NFC East. One more, I guess, double recording session to do. We got to do the West, NFC, and AFC West. We will be recording those tomorrow. They will be seeing those next week. But with that being said, if you guys enjoyed today's episode, you've liked these divisional breakdowns, we enjoy doing them. It gives us a chance to talk about a ton of the fantasy football assets right before the season, kind of give bold predictions, hot takes, all those other fun stuff that you guys like for fantasy. If you like that, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Have a goal of 3,000 subscribers by week 1. We are very, very close down to the wire here. Just hit that subscribe button for us if you haven't already. You like fantasy football content. You want good content to hit your feed throughout the year. I'm going to be doing a ton of content for us. So do that and join the Discord. There's a Discord. Free to join. Linked in the description. Helping you guys in your fantasy football leagues there as well. So War, where can they find you at? And what can they watch from you?
If you like pro wrestling, and you should, because despite what people think, pro wrestling is very cool. You should check us out on the Crimson Mask Pro Wrestling. That's our YouTube channel. We talk about WWE. We talk about AEW. We piss people off with our takes. And yeah, boy, do I piss people off. Crimson Mask Pro Wrestling with an attitude, but don't get an attitude with me.
There you go. All right, guys. Well, as I mentioned, thank you for watching today's episode. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Until then, peace out.